The boy did not knock. That was the first thing Evander Cross noticed. Not the child himself. Not the rain soaking through his thin jacket. Not the piece of folded paper clutched in his fist like it was the last solid thing in the world. What Evander noticed first was that the door to his private office on the 34th floor of the Cross Tower had opened. Without a knock, and in 11 years of running the most feared real estate empire in Toronto, no one had ever done that twice. His head of security, Rourke, appeared half a second behind the boy, face pale, with something that was not quite fear but lived in the same neighborhood. He came up the freight elevator, Rourke said. We don't know how. Evander looked at the boy. 8 years old, maybe. Dark hair plastered to his forehead. A cut on his chin that had stopped bleeding but not long ago. He was not crying. That was the second thing Evander noticed, because children who looked like this one, soaked, shaking, alone in a room full of men who could break a city block with a phone call. Children like that usually cried. This one stood with his feet together, and his chin lifted and his eyes fixed on Evander with the particular steadiness of someone who had already decided that falling apart was not an option. In his right hand he held the paper. In his left, pressed against his ribs beneath the jacket, he held a photograph. "What is your name?" Evander said. It did not come out as a question. "Jonah," the boy said. "Jonah Ashford." The name moved through the room like a current. Rourke went very still near the door. Two of the men who had been standing by the windows shifted their weight without meaning to. Evander heard the name land inside his chest and felt the walls he had spent a decade building absorb the impact in silence. Ashford. He had not spoken that name aloud in 7 years. He had not allowed anyone in his orbit to speak it either, not because it was dangerous in the way some names were dangerous, not because it belonged to an enemy, because it belonged to someone he had failed without ever meaning to, and some losses sat in a man so quietly that even the sound of them became too much to carry in an open room. Evander looked at the child, the pale face, the dark eyes, careful and direct, a mouth pressed flat with the effort of staying composed. He looked like her. He looked exactly like her. "How old are you, Jonah?" 8. Evander heard the number. For a moment his mind refused to settle around it. 8. 8 years ago, Elena Ashford had left his apartment in the Distillery District on a Tuesday morning in November, with nothing but her coat and the keys she no longer needed. He had come home that evening to find the keys on the counter and no note. He had stood in the kitchen for a long time, not moving. 8 years ago, which meant she had already been carrying Jonah when she left. Which meant for 8 years, while Evander had built towers and signed deals and made men understand that crossing him was not a recoverable mistake, somewhere a boy had been learning to walk, to read, to press his chin up when he was frightened. Somewhere Elena had been raising his hand. Evander set down the pen in his hand. He did not reach for anything else. "Your mother sent you here." Jonah nodded once. His throat moved before he spoke. "She said you would understand." "Where is she?" The boy's eyes did not waver. "The hospital. She got sick. She's been sick for a long time." A pause. "She got too sick to talk last week." Evander looked at Rourke. Rourke looked at the floor. "What kind of sick?" Evander asked. Jonah looked down at his shoes. One of the laces was untied. There was mud on the heel, the kind they can't fix anymore. Something shifted in Evander's chest. He could not name it cleanly. It was not grief, not yet. It was the shape of grief before grief knows it has arrived. He looked at the paper in Jonah's hand. "Can I see that?" Jonah crossed the room. He did not hesitate, though every man in the office watched him move. He placed the paper on the edge of the desk and stepped back immediately, the way someone stepped back when they had learned that getting too close to things was a way of losing them. Evander opened it. It was a photograph, creased at the corners, protected inside a plastic sleeve sealed with tape, a younger version of himself standing outside a coffee shop near Kensington Market. A gray morning, both hands around a paper cup. He remembered the day only because Elena had laughed while taking it, told him he looked like a man waiting for a verdict. He turned it over. On the back, in Elena's handwriting, the small pressured script she used when she meant something completely, were 2 lines. "If I run out of time, Jonah knows where to go. There is more to him than my fear. Find it." Evander read it once, then again. He could see her hand in every letter. Elena wrote like she argued, with precision, like she could not afford to waste a single word. He folded the photograph along its crease and set it on the desk in front of him. "She told you to come here," he said. "She told me to come when she couldn't anymore." Jonah's fingers tightened around the edge of his sleeve. "I didn't know if you'd want me here." The sentence struck him with a force he did not let reach his face. "Come here," he said. Jonah did not move. Evander understood. Children did not owe strangers their trust, especially strangers who sat behind desks in towers and had the kind of silence around them that made adults nervous. He reached for his left hand slowly and pulled back the cuff of his jacket. On the inside of his wrist was a small scar, a narrow crescent, pale against his skin, from a glass that had broken in his hand the night Elena left. He had never had it properly treated. He had not wanted to. Jonah stared at it, his lips parted. "She has one too," he said quietly. "Same shape, she said it was yours." Evander had no prepared response to that. He pushed the chair nearest the window back with his foot. "Sit down." Jonah sat on the very edge, ready to move. "Are you hungry?" He looked like he wanted to deny it. "Yes." Evander pressed the intercom near his desk. His assistant answered on the first tone. "Bring up a meal, soup, bread, something warm. No one enters without knocking." He looked at Jonah. "No milk, beep," Jonah said. "What do you drink?" "Orange juice." "Orange juice," Evander repeated into the intercom. A pause. Then, "Yes, sir." While they waited, Jonah sat with his hands in his lap. His jacket was still wet. There was a hospital bracelet on his wrist, the paper kind, worn soft at the edges. Evander looked at it. "You were with her every day after school." He looked at the bracelet. "I didn't want to take it off." Evander looked away before his face did something he could not control. 7 years earlier, Elena Ashford had come into his life through a planning dispute. She was a heritage architect, 26 years old, working for a firm that was trying to block one of his demolition permits in the annex. She had appeared at a public consultation meeting and spoken for 9 minutes without a single filler word, making the case that the building he wanted to tear down had more structural integrity than anything he was proposing to replace it with. She had looked directly at him the entire time, not at his lawyers, not at the camera, at him. He had not won the permit. He had asked for her card anyway. Their first conversation outside the hearing room had started with her saying, "You can try to charm me, but I reviewed your last 4 demolitions and none of them needed to happen." He had told her the conversation was already going better than most. She had almost smiled. For a year and a half after that, she had been the only honest thing in his life. Not naive? Elena was too observant for innocence. She understood exactly what kind of world existed around him. The money that moved through channels no one asked about. The meetings in rooms with no record of taking place. The way men lowered their eyes when Evander walked in because they had already calculated the cost of looking too long. She had known all of it. She had loved him anyway, or something so close to love that Evander had mistaken it for a fixed point. They had never fought loudly. That was how it ended. No slammed doors. She had simply become quieter, and he had been too busy not noticing to understand what that meant. Then one morning he came home to keys on the counter and a kitchen that had never felt so large. He had searched for 3 months, quietly at first, then in the way that a man searched when he could not afford not to find something. Her firm said she had resigned. Her friends said they had not heard from her. One of them, a woman named Cecile, had looked at him for a long moment before saying that maybe Elena needed to find out who she was outside of his life. He had stopped looking after that, not because he believed it, because he thought she was better off outside the reach of what he was. The food arrived after a knock. Evander went to the door himself and took the tray before anyone else could enter. He placed it on the table near the window. Jonah ate the way children ate when hunger had become a habit. Quickly, carefully, without looking up, he tore the bread into pieces. He finished the soup before the bowl could cool. When he wiped his mouth and set the napkin down, he looked toward the door. "Is the big man angry?" Evander looked at him. "Which one? The one who followed me in, with the gray hair, Rourke?" Evander considered. "He isn't angry, he's unsettled." "That's different." Jonah seemed to find this acceptable. He looked at his wrist, at the hospital bracelet. "A woman from the children's aid came to the hospital yesterday. She talked to the nurse in the hallway. I could hear them through the door." He paused. "She said she'd come back tomorrow." Evander's jaw set. "Do you want to go back to the hospital tonight?" he asked. Jonah gripped the edge of the table. "Is that what you want?" "I ask what you want." He looked at the window, at the Toronto skyline going dark in the rain. "I don't want to go somewhere I don't know." "Then you won't." Jonah turned to look at him. "You don't know me. I know enough. My mum said you might not want anything to do with me." The words were delivered carefully, but they landed hard. Elena had said that, or feared it enough to prepare him for it. Evander looked at the boy who had his mother's eyes and his own habit of going very still when something mattered. She was wrong about that. Jonah's jaw tightened the way a child's did when they were trying not to feel too much in front of a stranger. "Okay." Evander stood. "We're leaving. Where? My house. Is it far?" "No." A pause. "Do you have a dog?" Evander looked at him. No, do you have cereal? Something shifted in his chest, small and unannounced. I can get cereal. Jonah slid from the chair. He was small for 8. Evander reached for his jacket to help him with it, then stopped. He did not know whether that was something children accepted from people they had only just met. Jonah solved it by holding out one arm. Evander helped him into the jacket without comment. In the elevator, Rourke stood beside them with the particular stillness of a man who had recalculated the shape of the evening 3 times and was now just committing to it. His eyes went to Jonah once, then to Evander. Evander did not explain. Car, he said. They moved through the underground parking level. Jonah walked close without quite touching. In the black SUV, he buckled his own belt with concentrated effort and pressed his face to the window as they pulled out into the city. Rain made the streets look lit from underneath, neon from a pharmacy. A streetcar moving through an intersection. A woman sheltering under an awning holding her collar closed. Evander took out his phone. His first call was to Rourke's number, though Rourke sat in the front. I need everything on Elena Ashford. Last address, medical records, attending physician, any legal documents, any social worker involved with the child, any next of kin listed anywhere. A pause. By morning, understood. His second call was to a family lawyer whose discretion he had paid for generously over 11 years. She answered on the second ring. Evander, it's 10 at night. I need emergency guardianship papers drawn up for a minor, 8 years old. Mother in critical care, no listed next of kin. A pause longer than the first. Are you related to the child? Evander looked at Jonah, who was still watching the rain trace lines down the glass. Yes. Another pause. I'll need documentation. You'll have it. This isn't a parking variance. I'm aware of what it is. A breath, then, send me whatever you have. I'll start the filing tonight. He ended the call. Made one more to the hospital. He asked to be connected to the nursing station on the palliative care floor. A woman answered, tired and careful. I'm calling about Elena Ashford, he said. I'm the father of her son. I want to understand her current status, and I want it understood that no external agency is to make decisions about the child until I've spoken with her physicians directly. A pause. Are you listed on her file? I will be by tomorrow morning. Jonah had stopped looking at the window. He was watching Evander now, very still. Evander met his eyes for a moment, then he looked back at the city. The house was in Rosedale, a limestone townhouse behind a black iron gate, 4 stories, all the windows dark. Evander had bought it 7 years ago for the same reason he bought most things, because it was structurally sound and no one could touch it. He had never thought of it as lonely. He had never thought of it as anything beyond useful. Jonah stood on the cement sidewalk and looked up at it. It's very big? Yes. Do you live here alone? Yes. Jonah nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. It looks like a house that forgot what it was for. Rourke coughed quietly behind them. Inside, Jonah moved carefully. His sneakers squeaked on the stone floor. He looked at the high ceilings, the dark staircase, the absence of photographs, the absence of anything that had not been chosen for function. You don't have any pictures, he said. No, my mom has pictures everywhere. He touched the edge of a bookshelf without leaning on it. She says a home without pictures is just a place you sleep. Evander looked at the walls. He had never noticed them as particularly empty. He noticed it now. Rourke went upstairs to clear the rooms. Evander led Jonah to the kitchen, which was large and cold and had the aesthetic of something that had been designed by people who believed money could substitute for warmth. Jonah climbed onto a stool at the island and watched him open cabinets. You don't cook, he said. I can cook. What can you make? Evander opened the refrigerator. Eggs, a container of something he did not trust, half a block of cheese, orange juice, which he had not bought but was apparently there. He held it up. Jonah's face changed slightly, just for a moment. That's the kind she buys. Evander set it on the counter without comment and found a glass. He made eggs. They were not good eggs. Jonah ate them without complaint, which was either politeness or hunger, possibly both. When he finished, he put his fork down and looked at the counter. Can I ask you something? Yes, were you bad to her? He said it the way children said hard things, directly, without building to it. My mom. I don't mean did you love her? I know you did. She said you did. I mean, were you bad to her? Evander set down the pan he was holding. He could have answered quickly. He could have said no and moved on. But Jonah was looking at him with 8-year-old eyes that had spent months in a hospital room listening through doors, and he deserved something more precise than ease. No, Evander said. Not in the way you mean. Jonah waited, but my life made it hard for her to stay. The things I did, the people around me. She was afraid of what that would become if she stayed long enough. And I didn't ask her to tell me what she was afraid of. I let her leave because some part of me thought she'd be better off without me." He paused. "That was a mistake." Jonah looked at the table. "She never said your name was bad. She just said she wasn't brave enough to stay and you weren't brave enough to ask her to." Evander felt that settle somewhere deep and uncomfortable. "She was right. She's usually right," Jonah said. "It's annoying sometimes." He said it so flatly that it took Evander a moment to understand it as something that had also been a kind of love. That night, the guest room had white walls and white sheets and nothing else. It was a room designed for people who were not expected to stay. Jonah stood in the doorway. "This is yours for now," Evander said. "For now is like temporary." Evander remembered the word. He corrected himself. "This is yours." Jonah touched the edge of the bed frame. "For how long?" The question stopped him. Evander had made men accept terms they did not want simply by holding eye contact long enough. This one left him without a ready answer. "As long as you need it." Jonah looked at him. "My mum said needing things is how you know what matters." Evander looked at his son. He said the sentence once carefully, as if placing it on something breakable. "Then it will be here as long as things matter." Jonah was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay," and went to sit on the edge of the bed. Evander found clean clothes, a white shirt from a set that had never been used, and left it on the dresser. He stood outside the closed bathroom door and waited, uncertain in a way that was foreign enough to be uncomfortable. When Jonah came out, the shirt fell past his knees. His wet hair had been combed with his fingers. "I usually have a book," Jonah said. "My mum reads me one chapter before I sleep. She's been reading me bird books, because I like birds." A pause. "She said birds know when to fly and when to stay. She said most people only figure out one of those." Evander had no children's books. He looked at the shelf in the hall and saw only legal texts and city planning documents and 2 volumes of architectural history he had never opened. "I don't have bird books," he said. "I know." Jonah pulled the sheet up to his chest. "It's okay." It was not okay. He heard it clearly. "I'll leave the hall light on." He moved to the door. "Mr. Cross." He turned. Jonah looked at the ceiling. "She talks about you sometimes. Not a lot, but sometimes when she doesn't think I'm listening." He was quiet for a moment. "She says you were the most honest person she ever met, except about the things that mattered most." Evander stood in the doorway with the hallway light behind him. "She wasn't wrong," he said. He left the door open 3 inches. Downstairs, Rourke was waiting in the study with a phone in one hand, and the expression of a man who had reorganized everything he understood about the evening. Evander walked to the window, rain against the glass. The street below, bright and wet. Normal people finishing normal nights in lit windows across the road. "Is he yours?" Rourke said. Evander looked at the dark garden. "Yes." "You're certain?" "Yes." Rourke was quiet for a long moment. "Then everything shifts." Evander did not answer. He was listening for the sound of the house above him. A small weight crossing the floor. The creak of the guest bed accepting someone new. For the first time in years, the house did not feel like a container. It felt like it was waiting for something to happen inside it. By morning, Rourke had the file. Elena Ashford, 33 years old, born in Halifax. Father deceased, mother deceased 4 years prior, no siblings. One aunt listed on an old university form, also gone. No one. Evander read the pages at the kitchen table while Jonah sat across from him eating cereal. 3 different boxes had appeared by 6 a.m. sourced by Rourke through means Evander did not ask about. He read the medical summary last. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed 14 months ago. Surgery. Partial. Response. Recurrence. Palliative transition confirmed 8 weeks prior. He closed the folder. The kitchen was very quiet. Jonah looked at him from over the cereal bowl. "She was sick before she told me," he said. "She didn't want me to stop going to school." Evander looked at his son. "She protected everyone," Jonah said, in a voice that was too old for his face. "That's the thing about her. She protects people even when it costs her." He went back to his cereal. Outside, January had begun to lighten the sky. The hospital visit happened the following afternoon. Elena was in a private room on the palliative floor at Mount Sinai, connected to a series of monitors that produced soft, steady sounds. She was awake but not strong. The medication kept the worst of the pain at a distance, but took the sharpness of her along with it. Evander had prepared himself. He had been in rooms with difficult things his entire adult life. He walked into her room and felt completely unprepared. She was smaller than he remembered. Or perhaps what he remembered was the force of her, which had always made her seem larger than her actual body. Now the force was present but muted, the way a fire looked when most of the wood had already burned. She opened her eyes when she heard him. She looked at him for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "You came." "He found me," Evander said. He sat in the chair beside the bed. I know, I sent him. She turned her head slightly. Was he frightened? No, he was composed. He's very composed. Something like pride crossed her face, worn thin by exhaustion but real. He gets that from me. The stubbornness too, probably. Definitely the stubbornness too. She was quiet for a moment. Her hand lay still on the white blanket. I should have called you. Yes, I was afraid. I know. She looked at the ceiling. I thought I was protecting him. I thought keeping him away from your world was the only way he could grow up whole. A pause. I think I was also protecting myself from having to ask you for something and finding out you wouldn't give it. Evander looked at her. I would have given you anything. I know that now. Her voice was steady but careful. I knew it then too. I think that's why I was afraid. You would have given me everything, and it still would have been inside your world, and I didn't know if I was strong enough to raise a child in it. He did not argue. She had not been wrong. He needs you, she said. He's ready to need you, even if he doesn't say it that way. He asked me if I had cereal. She laughed. It was a real laugh, brief and surprised, and it passed through the room like something returning from a long absence. He asks everyone that. He says you can tell what kind of house a place is by whether someone thought about breakfast. Evander felt the laugh move through him strangely, like a door opening in a wall he had stopped checking. I'll take care of him, he said. Elena looked at him. I know you will. That part I was never afraid of. She closed her eyes for a moment. Don't love him like an obligation. He'll know. He notices everything. He told me your house had forgotten what it was for. Her eyes opened again. Did he? A pause. He's probably right. Evander stayed for 2 hours. When he left, Jonah was waiting in the corridor on a chair outside the room, a library book open on his knees, a paper crane folded from a hospital pamphlet sitting on the cover. He looked up when Evander appeared. Is she okay? She's tired. She said to tell you she heard you reading to her this morning. Jonah looked back at the book. I read her 2 chapters. She was asleep by the end of the first one, but I finished anyway because she always wants to know what happens. Evander sat down beside him. They sat in the corridor for a while without talking. The way people sometimes did when talking was not what the moment required. After a time, Jonah asked, Is your house going to be my house? Yes. For real. He nodded, looking at the crane on his book. I want to put things on the walls. My mom's house has things on the walls. You can put things on the walls. Another pause. And I want a bird book, a real one, with photos. I'll get you one. Jonah folded. The book closed carefully. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay. On the 3rd day, a problem announced itself through Rourke's careful expression, and a name Evander had been monitoring for months. Brennan Shea, a man who ran a construction racket out of Hamilton and had been quietly testing the edges of Evander's contract territory in Mississauga. Small bites, the kind meant to see whether the response was proportional. Evander had been patient. Patience was one of his few genuine virtues. Someone had told Shea about Jonah, not the details. Rourke had been careful, but enough. A car had driven past Jonah's school twice in the same afternoon. A man asking at the school office whether a new student had enrolled. Nothing explicit. Enough to be a message. Evander read the report at the kitchen table while Jonah was upstairs reading. He read it twice, then set it down and looked at the wall where Jonah had taped a drawing the day before. A house, a bird, a tall man, and a boy standing close. It was not sophisticated work. It was the most important thing on the wall. Rourke spoke carefully. She is not smart, but he's patient. And he's hungry. I know what he is. A child changes your calculations. That's what he's banking on. Evander looked at the drawing. He's right that it changes my calculations. He's wrong about which direction. That evening, Jonah came downstairs with a question that had clearly been sitting with him for a while. He found Evander at the kitchen counter and stood on the other side of the island, arms crossed, in the posture of someone preparing to say something difficult. Are there bad people who know about me now? Evander looked at him. Yes. Jonah absorbed this without flinching. Because of you. Yes. Is it bad? I'm handling it. Jonah looked at the drawing he had taped to the wall. My mom used to say that the measure of someone wasn't whether bad things happened, it was whether they fixed them. He looked back at Evander. Are you fixing it? Yes. Okay. He unfolded his arms. I made you another drawing. It's on the fridge. He went back upstairs. Evander walked to the refrigerator. The new drawing was smaller than the others, taped beside a grocery list Rourke had left. It showed the same tall man, but now there was a line between him and the small boy, not holding hands, close enough that the space between them looked chosen. Evander stood in front of it for a long time. The action against Shea was not theatrical. It was not designed to be. Evander made 3 calls over 2 days. By the end of the first, a union inspector with impeccable timing descended on 2 of Shay's active job sites with paperwork that would take months to untangle. By the end of the second, a financing arrangement Shay had relied on dissolved when the investor involved received a very clear picture of who else was aware of how the money moved. By the third day, Shay's lawyer contacted Rourke's office to express the client's desire to de-escalate. There was no meeting on a pier, no confrontation. Evander sent Rourke to receive the full accounting of who had seen Jonah and what had been said, with the clear understanding that any further curiosity about his household would result in a more permanent version of the current inconvenience. Rourke came back with names, and the message that Shay had relocated his operations further west. Evander was in the kitchen helping Jonah with a school project about migratory birds when Rourke appeared in the doorway. He read the room. He waited. Evander looked at him. Rourke gave the small nod. Sorted. Evander turned back to the project. You said Arctic terns travel the furthest of any bird, 70,000 kilometers a year, Jonah said without looking up from his worksheet. Back and forth. They always come back. That's a long way to go. They know the way, Jonah said simply. They remember it. The hospital called on a Thursday evening. Evander was in the study. Jonah was upstairs reading. The voice on the phone was the attending physician, measured and kind in the way that particular kind of kindness was practiced. Elena had lost consciousness that afternoon. She had not woken. Her vitals were declining. Evander went upstairs. Jonah was sitting on his bed with a book open but not reading. He looked up when Evander appeared in the doorway. He had the face of someone who already knew what was coming, but was not going to say so until someone else said it first. Evander sat on the edge of the bed. He had spent 11 years being the man who spoke the difficult truths in difficult rooms, because no one else was going to do it properly. He had never done it for someone he loved. He looked at Jonah and told him the truth. Jonah did not cry immediately. He sat with it for a moment, his hands flat on the book, his face very still. Then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead against Evander's shoulder, and the grief arrived slowly, the way it did for children who had been carrying it for so long that their bodies already knew its shape. Evander held him. He did not say it would be all right. It was not. He did not say anything. He put one hand on the back of Jonah's head and stayed. Elena Ashford died the following morning, just before dawn. Rourke handled the arrangements with the kind of care he applied to everything that mattered. Evander sat with Jonah in the kitchen and told him in the gray morning light, and they sat for a long time without speaking while the city outside began its ordinary day. After a while, Jonah asked if they could go to the park. Evander said yes. They walked through Rosedale in the cold, and Jonah pointed out 3 different birds by species, and Evander listened, and neither of them talked about anything important, which was the most important thing they could have done. Spring came slowly. It always did in Toronto. The snow lingered through March, then retreated inch by inch, leaving behind the particular smell of thawed earth and melting pavement that had always struck Evander as an honest smell, not pleasant exactly, but real. Jonah's room was no longer white. He had decided on a blue-gray color that he described as the color of lake water before it decides whether to be cold, and which Evander could not argue with. They had painted it on a Saturday. Evander had been better at the taping than the rolling. Jonah had been better at both. The house had begun to change in ways Evander noticed only when he looked at it from the outside. There were drawings on the refrigerator, changed out weekly. There was a bird field guide on the kitchen table, alongside the financial documents Rourke brought on Tuesdays. There was a pair of muddy boots by the front door that did not belong to anyone over 4 feet tall. The security cameras still watched the perimeter. The doors were still reinforced, but inside the rooms had begun to breathe. One evening, Jonah came home from school with a permission form for a spring overnight trip to Algonquin Park. He left it on the counter and went upstairs without mentioning it. Evander found it under a drawing of a kingfisher. He signed it. He left it on top of the drawing. The next morning, Jonah picked it up, looked at the signature, and looked at Evander. You didn't ask me any questions about it. You left it where I'd find it. That was the question. Jonah considered this. Dr. Ellison says I communicate indirectly sometimes. Dr. Ellison is correct. Jonah folded the form and put it in his backpack. At the door he stopped. Mr. Cross. Evander looked up. Jonah's face was turned slightly away in the way he held himself when something mattered enough to make him careful about it. I told my class you were my dad. The hallway was very quiet. You don't have to call me that, Evander said. I know. Jonah put one hand on the door. But names should match what people do. That's what my mum said. He opened the door. Rourke's outside, I know he is. He brought muffins again. He does that. Jonah went out. The door closed. Evander stood in the hallway of a house that had once been a container and was now something else entirely, something he did not have a precise word for, only the feeling of it, solid and unfamiliar and permanent. On the refrigerator, between a drawing of a loon and a permission form for a school art show, Jonah had taped a small photograph, Evander and Jonah outside the bookshop on Queen Street where they had found the bird atlas. Jonah was pointing at the window. Evander was looking at Jonah. Neither of them had known Rourke was behind them with a phone. Beneath it, in Jonah's careful printing, 4 words. We remember the way. Evander Cross stood in front of the refrigerator for a long moment. Outside, the city moved through its ordinary morning. Somewhere past the iron gate, a robin was doing something purposeful in the front garden. The lake, a few kilometers south, was deciding whether to be warm. He made coffee. He left a muffin on Jonah's place at the table. He sat down and the house held them both, steady and unhidden, no longer quiet in the way that meant empty but quiet in the way that meant full.